Recording in progress.
Adanaroni, Natongaya, Chausing Ani, Yama the Great, Tongoya, she said, Donguni, Kreni, Sadonye, the La, Natong Senate, Jadavini, Jangong Dine, Romu did down by Uni, Aliyakwe, shwewarwin Jow, Mogo Badana, Tamayita, Twin, Sing Jamba Pilo Adi. Yama, then where we doing, Tayar, Congo, Serolano, Shinduya, Louis Pong, Rohom, Guinea, Celebio, Shouta, Toma, Race of the Mopan, and then the Yaroma Senate Chabale, then the Saki, as of Yashin, Gorogita, the Modata, O. J. Usuri, Yashiko, Uso, Roja, Namo Tata Bhagavato Arahato Dhamma Sambuddhassa Namo Tata Bhagavato Arahato Dhamma Sambuddhassa Namo Tata Bhagavato Arahato Dhamma Okay, today what I'm going to talk about is dependent origination. Concerning with the dependent origination, we have already discussed 12 factors. We have already discussed 12 factors. Fundamentally, physically, we have already finished. We have to say so. Presently, what I'm going to explain is dependent origination, how they are linking each other, how they are cycling. According to the dependent origination, how they are cycling each other, how they are relating to each other. This is a very important point. To study dependent origination according to the Mogo method based on Buddha's teaching, this is really important. When you study dependent origination, at first you have to understand 12 factors. Only 12 factors is not enough. Understanding 12 factors is not enough. If you understand 12 factors, you have to study how they are linking each other, how they are cycling according to this diagram, according to the Mogo method, based on Buddha's teaching. That is also how to cycle dependent origination. According to the Mogo method, how to cycle dependent origination. That is also very important. That is very important point. Mogo method, when you study Mogo method, this is essential how they are linking each other, how to cycle this dependent origination. That is really important. Today's topic is very important for all of you. This is a very important point. We have already finished 11 lessons 11 lectures we have already finished. That lectures are also very important. Without understanding that lecture, you cannot understand today's topic. Today's topic is based on 11 lectures. Today, what I'm going to explain is 2 and the root. According to this diagram, 2 and the root, you have to understand 2 and the root. When you study dependent origination, and not only Burmese language but also English, whatever you study, you have to understand 2 and the root. You have to study 2 and the root. That is very essential. So today I am going to explain 2 and the root. To understand 2 and the root, look at this diagram. You can have a look at this diagram. In this diagram, you can see at the middle of this diagram, you can see Avijja and Tanha. Avijja and Tanha in this diagram. Avijja and Tanha at the middle of this diagram. Avijja and Tanha, you can see Avijja and Tanha. That is a very important point in this diagram. Avijja and Tanha are 2 roots in this diagram. There are 2 roots. We call that is 2 in the root. That is called 2 in the root. 2 roots, 2 kinds of root in this diagram. In this diagram, in this existence. In this existence. In this diagram means in this existence. In this existence, there are 2 roots. The first one, Avijja, ignorance. The second one, Tanha, craving. Avijja, ignorance, Tanha, craving, you have to understand. Avijja and Tanha are 2 roots. We call 2 roots, 2 in the root. To understand 2 in the root, let's have a look at this diagram. Without seeing this diagram, you can understand this explanation. This explanation. To understand this explanation, look at this diagram. Okay, Venerable Narada.
Yeah, Ishan.
Are you very busy?
Yeah.
Can you see this diagram?
I'm very busy. I am listening now.
Oh, you are listening?
Now, yeah.
Can you see this? Mouse pointer, cursor. Can you see this cursor pointer? Here on the diagram, can you see cursor? Mine?
Yeah, Ishan.
Oh, okay. Can you see cursor? Here, shaking cursor. My cursor is pointing here with the mouse, no? Can you see? Avijja, can you see Avijja? At the middle of the diagram, Avijja, can you see? Avijja and Tanha. Avijja and Tanha. Here. The Avijja internals are very important in this diagram. When you see Avijja internals, I have to explain that without seeing this diagram, it's difficult to understand. If you can see this diagram, easy to understand. It is easy to understand. This is a very important point. Okay. In this diagram, 2 in the root. Let me explain 2 in the root. I hope you may see this diagram. To understand 2 in the roots, at first you have to understand 12 factors. You have to review 12 factors. 12 factors. In the number 1 session, number 1 groups, in the number 1 session, in the number 1 groups, Avijja, Sankhara, Avijja and Sankhara. Okay, Venerable Uvisara. Venerable Uvisara. Can you see this diagram? This circle? Can you see this circle? This diagram. Can you read this diagram, this circle? Can you read it? Can you see clearly? Avijja, Tanna.
Yes, I can see clearly.
Okay. In that case, you can understand. Now, without seeing this diagram, you cannot understand. Okay. I'm trying to explain, and by using this diagram, today's lecture, without seeing this diagram, it is difficult to understand. If you see this diagram, you can understand very easily. Okay. Venerable Unarada, is okay? Can you see clearly? No?
Yes, teacher. Okay.
Please pay attention to this diagram.
Yes, teacher.
Please be careful to see this diagram. And
yes, teacher.
And if you can see this diagram clearly, when I explain, you can understand clearly. Without seeing this diagram, it is difficult to understand. Today's lecture is very important.
Yes, teacher.
Yes, we have already discussed 11 lectures. We have already finished 11 lectures. That 11 lectures is a help today's lectures. It's going to help today's lectures. Without understanding 11 lectures, you can understand today's topic. Today's topic is really important. I'm using this circle, I'm using this diagram, I'm going to explain. So you have to see this diagram. Look at this diagram. At the middle of this diagram, Avijja and Tanna, they are called 2 in the root. They are called 2 in the root. 2 in the root. Avijja. To understand 2 in the root, we have to understand 12 factors. We have to study 12 factors. We have to review 12 factors. Avijja and Sankhara in the number 1 section. This is the number 1 section. Number 1 groups. And number 2 section. This is the number 2 section. Number 2 group. This is the number 3. This is the number 4. In this diagram, and how many sessions do you see? How many sessions? 4 sessions. Altogether 4 sessions. This is the number 1. Here you can see very clearly. Number 1 session, here number 2, number 3, and number 4. Altogether 4 sessions, 4 groups. Number also, can you see Unarora? Number?
Yes, I can see.
Okay, that's a good idea. This is really good. Okay, in that case, in the number 1 section, how many factors are there you have to understand. In the number 1 section, how many factors are there? 2 factors. 2 factors. Avijja and Sankhara. Avijja and Sankhara. 2 factors in the number 1 session. In the number 1 groups, there are 2 factors. What are they? They are Avijja and Sankhara. Avijja and Sankhara. Avijja, ignorance, Sankhara, volitional actions, volitional activities, volitional formations. As you understand, you can remember, doesn't matter. Okay, Avijja and Sankharas are in the number 1 session. In the number 2 session, go to the number 2. In the number 2 session, there are 5 factors. Vijnana, Nama Rupa, Salayarana, Asa, Vedana. Yes. Vedana, altogether 5 factors in the number 2. Vijnana, Nama Rupa, Salayarana, Asa, Vedana. Altogether 5 factors in the number 2 session. In the number 1 session, how many factors? In the number 1 section, how many factors? 2 factors. What are they? They are Avijja and Sankhara. How many factors are in the number 2? In the number 2 section, there are 5 factors. What are they? They are Vijnana, Namarupa, Salayarana, Phassa, and Vedana. Altogether 5 factors in the number 2 session. In the number 1, 2 factors. In the number 2, 5 factors. Altogether 7 factors we have to understand.
Yes, teacher.
Now we have already discussed 7 factors. And again, we have to go to the number 3 sessions. Number 3 sessions. In the number 3, there are Tanna, Upadana, Kamabhava, altogether 3 factors. Tanna, Upadana, Kamabhava. Craving, clinging, and becoming. 3 factors are in the number 3 session. In the number 3 session, 3 factors. In the number 1 session, how many factors? 2 factors. In the number 2 sections, how many factors? 5 factors. In the number 1, 2 factors. In the number 2, 5 factors. 2 and 5, altogether 7. In the number 3, in the number 3 sessions, 3 factors. In the number 1, 2 factors. In the number 2, 5 factors. 2 and 5, altogether 7. In the number 3, 3 factors. 7 and 3, altogether 10. 10 factors. We understand 10 factors. We understand 10 factors. Go to number 4 session. In the number 4 sessions, Jati, Jaramarana, Jati, Jaramarana. Jati, birth, Jaramarana, old age and death. Jati is 1 factor. 1 factor. Jaramarana is also 1 factor. Altogether 2 factors. Jati and Jaramarana, 2 factors. In the number 4 sessions, 2 factors. In the number 1, 2 factors. In the number 2, 5 factors. In the number 3, 3 factors. In the number 4, 4 factors. 2, 5, altogether 7, 7 and 3, altogether 10. 10 and 2, altogether 12. There are 12 factors in this diagram. Depending on one section, there arise 2 sessions. Depending on 2 sessions, there arise 3 sessions. Depending on 3 sessions, there arise 4 sessions. Depending on 1, there arise 2. Depending on 2, there arise 3. Depending on 3, there arise 4. This diagram is cycling by way of this method. This diagram is cycling ceaselessly, stoplessly, ceaselessly, without stopping. This diagram is cycling without stopping. Depending on number 1 session, there arise number 2 session. Depending on 2 session, there arise 3 session. Depending on 3 session, there arise 4 session. This diagram is cycling by way of session. Depending on avijja, there arises sankhara. Depending on sankhara, there arises vijnana, nama, rupa, salayana, phassa, vedana, tanna, upadana, kama, bhava, jadi, jaramarana, and so on. This diagram is cycling by way of 12 factors, by way of 4 sessions. We have to understand. Okay, if you understand 12 factors, they are relating each other. How they are relating each other, you can guess as much as possible. I hope you may understand. If you understand this process, you understand very clearly 2 in the root. You can understand 2 in the root very clearly. So 2 in the root means avijja and tanna. Avijja here in the number 1 section. The first one is avijja. Depending on this avijja, there arises sankhara. Depending on this sankhara, there arises vijnana. Depending on that vijnana, there arises nama, rupa. Depending on nama, rupa, there arises salayana. Depending on salayana, there arises phassa. Depending on phassa, there arises vedana. There arises vedana. Why this vedana is arising here? Why this vedana is arising here? Vedana, vijnana, nama, rupa, salayana, phassa, vedana, altogether 5. They are called 5 aggregates. We can call them as 5 aggregates. That is also 5 aggregates. When we study at the beginning of this diagram, at the beginning of this lesson, maybe the first lesson or second lesson, around that, we have studied 5 factors, 5 aggregates. We have already studied 5 aggregates. What are the 5 aggregates? 5 aggregates mean rupa khanda, vedana khanda, sanya khanda, sankhara khanda, and vijnana khanda. Aggregate of form, aggregate of feeling, aggregate of perception, aggregate of mental formation, aggregate of consciousness, feeling, perception, mental formation, consciousness. Pitaka. Now, here we can see in the diagram, Vijnana, Nama Rupa, Sanlayana, Phassa, Vedana. Here also 5 aggregates. That these 5 aggregates are according to the Sodana Pitaka, Sota Pitaka. According to the Sota Pitaka, we count 5 aggregates as Vijnana, Nama, Rupa, Sanlayana, Phassa, Vedana, something like that. In Abhidhamma Pitaka, not like that. In Abhidhamma, we have to count Rupa Khanda, Vedana Khanda, Sanya Khanda, Sankhara Khanda, Vijnana Khanda. That is according to Abhidhamma Pitaka. This is according to the Sotana Pitaka. And they are different from each other. Content is different. Essence is not so different. I hope essence is the same. To combine all together and matter and mind only. According to the Abhidhamma Pitakas, 5 aggregates mean matter and mind. According to the Sota Pitaka, 5 aggregates mean matter and mind. Essence is the same. Classification is different. Classification is different each other's. Content is different each other's. But essence is the same. We have to understand. Okay, in the number 2 session, Vijnana, Nama, Rupa, Sanlayana, Phassa, Vedana. This is called 5 aggregates. To understand very clearly, this is called human being, human life. Human life means 5 aggregates. 5 aggregate means human life. And conventional truth, this is our life. And ultimate truth, this is 5 aggregates. Now we are in the number 2 section. We are arriving in the number 2 session. We are in the number 2 session. We have 5 aggregates. We are human being. We have mind matters. This life, these 5 aggregates is called Dukkha Satya. This 5 aggregate is called Dukkha Satya. As long as we have 5 aggregates, we have to be old age, we have to be death, sickness, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. As long as 5 aggregates, we have to be old age and death. Birth is suffering, old age is suffering, death is suffering. As long as we have 5 aggregates, we have suffering. We have a noble truth of suffering. This is a noble truth of suffering. Now we are human beings, we have 5 aggregates. As long as 5 aggregates, we have noble truth of suffering. We are human beings, we have to be old age, we have to be dead. Old age is noble truth of suffering, death is noble truth of suffering, sickness is noble truth of suffering, death is noble truth of suffering, life is noble truth of suffering. 5 aggregate is noble truth of suffering because it is arising and disappearing. So, number 2 section, because in the past we have ignorant so-called the cause of this vijnana is avijja. To explain the whole section, the whole section. This number 2 section is the noble truth of dukkha. What is the root of this dukkha? The root of this dukkha is avijja. The root of this dukkha is ignorance. This ignorance is one root, so writing at the middle. The root of this present dukkha. At present we have dukkha because we have birth, old age and death. Birth is dukkha, old age is dukkha, death is dukkha, because we have 5 aggregates. We have to face suffering. We have to face noble truth of suffering because we have 5 aggregates. As long as we have 5 aggregates, we have noble truth of suffering. We have noble truth of suffering. Why do we have this noble truth of suffering? Because in the past we have ignorance, so-called avijja. Depending on that avijja, ignorance, that arises sankhara, volitional activities. Depending on this sankhara, volitional activities, there arise 5 aggregates. That 5 aggregate is dukkha satya. The main root of this present dukkha is avijja. The main cause of this present dukkha is called avijja. Because of avijja, there arise dukkha satya. Because of avijja, there arise 5 aggregates. There arise 5 aggregates. The root of these 5 aggregates is called avijja, ignorance. The cause of the main root of this 5 aggregate is called avijja. We have to understand. We have to understand. This is a very important point. If you understand this point, you understand next point very easily. So, because of avijja, ignorance, there arise 5 aggregates, so-called dukkha satya, noble truth of suffering. Now we have 5 aggregates, we have noble truth of suffering. Why do we have this suffering? Because in the past we have ignorance. Because of this ignorance, we have this suffering. This suffering is effect, avijja is cause. This suffering is effect, avijja is cause. Cause and effect only. So, avijja is the root of present suffering, present dukkha. The root of present dukkha is avijja. Because of avijja, we have this dukkha. Even though we have dukkha, we have suffering, we don't know that is suffering. In that case, we crave for that dukkha, that suffering. At that time, we have craving. We have craving. Depending on that craving, tanha, there arises clinging, upadana. Depending on that clinging, there arises becoming. Depending on becoming, there arises birth, old age and death. Birth is noble truth of suffering. Old age and death are also noble truth of suffering. Dukkha satya. Birth is noble truth of suffering. Old age is noble truth of suffering. Death is noble truth of suffering. They are called dukkha satya, the noble truth of suffering. Why do we have this future noble truth of suffering, future dukkha? Because we have ignorance. We have craving, so-called tanha. We have craving, tanha. As long as we have dana, we will have upadana, clinging. As long as we have upadana, clinging, we will have becoming. We will try as much as we can. That trying as much as we can is called becoming. When you're trying, physically, verbally, or mentally, you will be reborn. Jadi. That is called rebirth. When you have rebirth, you have to be old age in death, jaramarana. Birth is dukkha satya. Old age is dukkha satya. Death is dukkha satya, noble truth of dukkha. What is the cause of future dukkha satya? Future noble truth of suffering. What is the cause of future suffering? The cause of future suffering is called dana. The root of future suffering is called dana. The root of present suffering is called avijja. The root of future suffering is called dana. The root of present dukkha is avijja. The root of future dukkha is dana. Avijja is the root of present dukkha. Dana is the root of future dukkha. This diagram is cycling by way of 2 in the root. By way of 2 in the root. Because of this avijja, there arises present dukkha. Because of this dana, there will arise future dukkha. The cause of present dukkha is avijja. The cause of future dukkha is dana. The root of present dukkha is avijja. The root of future dukkha is dana. This diagram is cycling by way of 2 in the root. That is called 2 in the root. The root of present dukkha is avijja. The root of future dukkha is dana. There are 2 roots in this diagram. There are 2 roots. Okay, I hope you may understand. And you have already studied dependent origination by way of Mogosero's method, by way of Aditya's Mobara, and Burmese language, you have already understood. So, in English, you may understand very clearly. Okay. Someone please tell me what you understand. Venerable Narada, Venerable Vichara, or someone, please tell me as you understand. And 2 in the root, or whatever you understand, you can tell me as you understand.
Hello, teacher.
Yes, okay.
Today the internet is very bad, so sometimes I can hear our voice. So as I hear, I will read to our teacher. So today our teacher teaches 12 pattern.
Yes.
Yes, 12. Moko dependent origination is 4 session.
Yes.
So 1 session, 2 session, 3 session, 4 session. Among that, our server explained the 2 rules. So
yes.
2 rules. And they are the ways are the ignorance, dana, and craving.
Yes.
This is the middle of the cycle.
Okay.
Another, the 12 pattern is the past session is the 2 avijja and sankhara. Number 2 session is 5 kinds of things.
Yes.
So they are the vinya, nayo, salayana, patsa, vedana. And the 3 session is 3 This session is the 3 Phata,
Yes.
and they are Tana, Upada, Kama Bhava.
Kamabhava.
Number 4 session is 2 Phata.
Yes.
They are Zawgyi Unicode.
Ramarana, yes.
So our Sarati explained that number 2 session, the 5 Phata is 5 aggregates, Sotanda,
Yes.
you know, the consciousness, mind and matter, synthesis, touch and feeling. This is, and these are the suffering. Look at this.
Yes.
So, another way is Vidama is also 5 aggregates. They are form, sound, smell, taste, and tangible dim. So in breeze, 2 mind and matter.
Okay.
It's also the noble truth of suffering.
Yes. Yes, in the way truth of
After
suffering.
that, our teacher explained becoming awesa, becoming Bhava. Bhava
Yes.
becoming
Kamabhava.
dependent, becoming the arise, the arise bar.
Yes.
After that, we will feel the decay,
Yes.
decay and death, the old age and death, the sea, death, sorrow, limitation, pain, grief, and despair.
Yes.
So we should try to do not have futures and reborn.
Yes.
So reborn also the noble truth of suffering.
Yes.
That's all, teacher.
Okay. To understand 2 and the root, and you have to understand 12 factors. If you understand, and to understand 2 root, you have to understand 12 factors.
Yes.
If you understand 12 factors, you
Yes.
understand 2 and the root. What is 2 and the root? What are the 2 and the roots?
In the root, Awesa and Tana,
Vesa and Dana. Vesa is,
actually claim
yes. What is the root of present dukkha? What is the root of present
present
suffering?
5 Phata.
Yes, present. What is the root of present 5 factors?
They are the
The root,
Consciousness.
only one root. The root of present dukkha or present 5 aggregate. Dukkha and dukkha satya and 5 aggregates are the same. And this present 5 aggregates or present noble truth of suffering. What is the root of this present noble truth of suffering? The root, only one root for this present suffering. The root. This present suffering comes from root. What is the root? You have already understood 2 root. Which
Teachers,
root? Yeah.
internet is very bad.
Okay, so
Yeah,
sorry.
your question.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much, Venerable Narula. Okay.
Yes, teacher.
How about Uisara? Okay. Uisara is Uisara going out. Okay, today's topic is 2 and the root. 2 and the root. To understand 2 and the root, and you have to see this diagram. Without seeing this diagram, it's difficult to explain. So to understand this and 2 and the root, we have to study 12 factors, and we have to see this diagram. By using this diagram, you can understand and two in the root very easily. Otherwise, you cannot understand two in the root. Two in the root and two in the truth also very easy to understand. If you understand two in the root, you understand two in the truth. Two in the ultimate truth, two in the truth. Two in the ultimate truth means two in the truth. In short to the point, two in the truth. Two in the truth means, and Pali word, smuriya sajja, dukkha sajja, smuriya sajja, dukkha sajja. Smuriya sajja means the noble truth of the cause of suffering. Dukkha sajja means the noble truth of suffering. Smuriya sajja means the noble truth of the cause of suffering. Dukkha sajja means the noble truth of suffering. So, the cause of suffering, the cause of suffering, they are called two in the truth. Two in the truth. Two in the root means avijja and tanha. Two in the truth means the cause of suffering and suffering. Smuriya sajja and dukkha sajja. Smuriya sajja, the cause of suffering. Dukkha sajja, suffering. Smuriya sajja, the cause of suffering. Dukkha sajja, suffering. The cause of suffering and suffering. The cause of suffering and suffering. That is called two in the truth. Two in the root means avijja and tanha. Two in the truth means smuriya sajja and dukkha sajja. That is very easy to understand. When you practice this English, you can understand very easily. When you understand English, you understand this two in the root, two in the truth very easily. You can understand. So today you have to remember two in the root and two in the truth. Two in the root and two in the truth. Two in the root means avijja and tanha. Avijja, ignorance, tanha, craving. That is called two in the root. They are called two in the truth. What are the two in the? They are called two in the root. Avijja and tanhas are called two in the root. Two in the truth means smuriya sajja, dukkha sajja, smuriya sajja, dukkha sajja. They are called two in the truth. The noble truth of the cause of suffering, the noble truth of suffering, the noble truth of the cause of suffering, the noble truth of suffering. I hope today you have to remember two in the root and two in the truth. That is enough for today. If you understand, two in the root and two in the truth, you may understand any others. It is maybe very easy to understand. If you understand these two in the root and two in the truth, you can understand at all. It is very easy. How about Nara? You understand two in the root?
Yeah.
Well, what are the two in the root? Two in the roots. What are the two? Avijja and tanha. Avijja and tanha.
Yes.
They are called two in the root.
Two in the roots.
How about two in the truth?
Two in the truth, they are the noble truth of suffering, the noble truth of cause of suffering,
Yes.
the noble truth of suffering, the
Yes.
noble truth of cause of suffering,
Yes.
the noble truth of suffering.
Yeah, that is right. This is very easy to understand. Very easy to understand. Okay, you remember all of them. Venerable Vichara. Venerable Vichara. How about today lecture? Okay. How how many roots in this diagram? How many roots are there in this diagram? How many roots?
Today our teacher taught us two and root.
Yeah, two in the roots, yes. What are the two in the root? What are they?
And the truth is the root is avijja
and tanha.
And ignorance and craving.
Craving, yes, they are called two in the roots. Two in the roots.
They are two in the truth. In the root.
Two in the
roots. The truth is
two in the truth. And the second one, two and the truth. How many? How many? How many truths?
The cause of suffering.
Yes.
Two truths.
Yeah, two truths.
The origin of the cause of suffering and the noble truth of suffering.
Yes.
The cause of suffering and the noble truth of suffering.
Yeah, that is called truth and the truth. And truth and the root.
And they are two
and the truth.
Truth.
Two and the root. What
two
are
and the truth.
What are the two and the root? Two and the roots. Two roots.
Two and the roots are ignorance and craving.
That is correct.
Two and the truth are the cause of suffering, the noble truth of suffering, the origin of the cause of suffering,
yes,
and the noble truth of suffering.
Yeah, that is enough. If you understand, that is enough. And today, I'm explaining nearly 1 hour. Even though I'm explaining nearly 1 hour, you have to remember two in the root and two in the truth. This is enough. If you understand two in the root and two in the truth, understand two in the root mean avijja and tanha. They are called two in the root. And two in the truth mean samudaya satya and dukkha satya. That's all. Samudaya and dukkha. That's enough. Samudaya means the cause of suffering. Dukkha means suffering. The cause of suffering. And sometimes translations are many. No? The origin of suffering and suffering. The origin of suffering or suffering. You can explain as you understand. You can tell me as you understand. Doesn't matter. You can use any translation as you understand. And Pali word, two in the root mean avijja and tanha. Two in the truth mean samudaya satya. That's all. That's enough.
Dukkha satya.
And dukkha satya. And now you understand. I hope we have 5 aggregates. 5 aggregates in the number 2 section. In the number 2 section, we have 5 aggregates. That 5 aggregate is called dukkha satya.
Consciousness, mind and matter.
Yes.
Sense bases, contacts, and feeling.
Yeah, they are called 5 aggregates. Yeah, that 5 aggregate is called dukkha satya. Dukkha satya, the truth of suffering. Dukkha.
The 5 aggregate is noble truth of suffering.
Yeah, noble truth of suffering. The root of the noble. This is a present period. The root of this present suffering is called avijja. The cause of present suffering is called avijja. the cause of present suffering. The root of present suffering is called avijja. The root of future suffering is called tanha. The cause of future suffering is called tanha. The cause of present suffering is avijja. Because of avijja, there arise present suffering. Because of tanha, there arises dukkha. There will arise dukkha in the future. There arise dukkha in the future. Okay, and today what you have to understand is two root and two truth. Two in the root and two in the truth. It is enough for today. As we today, who is Arado, and as we the last week, who another simply love. Two in the root, Surah, Mula Nepsia. Two in the truth, Surah, this are the cool one. Mula Nepsia, two in the root. This are the cool, two in the truth.
In it.
In the truth.
This are Mula Nepsia, Surah, in the blessing, always on it, then now. Always on it, then now. ဒီပစ္စုပန်ကာလမှာအခုခန္ဓာ၅ပါးရထားတယ်ခန္ဓာ၅ပါးကိုဒုက္ခသစ္စာလို့ခေါ်တယ်အဲဒီခန္ဓာ၅ပါးဒုက္ခသစ္စာရဲ့မူလရဲ့အရင်းမြစ်ကြီးကဘာလို့လဲဆိုရင်အဝိဇ္ဇာဟာဒီပစ္စုပန်ဒုက္ခရဲ့မူလဒီတဏှာကြတော့အနာဂတ်ဒုက္ခသစ္စာရဲ့မူလအနာဂတ်ဒုက္ခသစ္စာရဲ့မူလကတဏှာပစ္စုပန်ဒုက္ခသစ္စာရဲ့မူလကအဝိဇ္ဇာပစ္စုပန်ကာလဒုက္ခသစ္စာရဲ့မူလကအဝိဇ္ဇာအနာဂတ်ဒုက္ခရဲ့မူလကတဏှာပစ္စုပန်ဒုက္ခရဲ့မူလကအဝိဇ္ဇာအနာဂတ်ဒုက္ခရဲ့မူလကတဏှာအဲတော့ဝိဇ္ဇာနဲ့တဏှာဟာဒုက္ခနှစ်ခုရဲ့မူလပစ္စုပန်ဒုက္ခနဲ့အနာဂတ်ဒုက္ခရဲ့မူလအဲကြောင့်သူတို့မူလနှစ်ဖြာလို့ခေါ်ပစ္စုပန်ဒုက္ခရဲ့မူလကအဝိဇ္ဇာအနာဂတ်ဒုက္ခရဲ့မူလကတဏှာဝိဇ္ဇာနဲ့တဏှာဟာမူလနှစ်ဖြာပဲသစ္စာနှစ်ခုအဲတော့သမုဒိယသစ္စာရဲ့ဒုက္ခသစ္စာရဲ့ဒါပဲသမုဒိယသစ္စာနဲ့ဒုက္ခသစ္စာပဲနှစ်ခါပြန်ဆိုရတယ်ဇဝိုင်းက၄ဘွဲ့ရှိနေတယ်အဲတော့သမုဒိယသစ္စာနဲ့ဒုက္ခသစ္စာဆိုပြီးသစ္စာနှစ်ခုကိုဒီလိုမှတ်ရမယ်အဲတော့ဒီနေ့ဒီလိုမူလနှစ်ဖြာရဲ့သစ္စာနှစ်ခုရဲ့နားလည်သွားရင်ဒီနေ့တဏှာကြီးနားထောင်ရတာအတော်အကျိုးရှိပြီလို့ယူဆပါတယ်အဲတော့မူလနှစ်ဖြာဆိုတော့ဝိဇ္ဇာနဲ့တဏှာပါလို့သိရင်တန်ဖိုးရှိပါပြီသစ္စာနှစ်ခုဆိုတော့ဘယ်လိုလဲဆိုရင်သမုဒိယသစ္စာနဲ့ဒုက္ခသစ္စာလို့နားလည်ရင်ပြည့်စုံပါပြီကဲဒါဆိုရင်ဆရာတော်ဒီတန်ခါတော်ရှင်မြတ်တွေကိုယောဂီတော်စင်တွေကိုတရားနာပရိသတ်တွေကိုအားလုံးကိုယ်လည်းကျမ်းမာကြပါစေစိတ်လည်းချမ်းသာကြပါစေကောင်းကျိုးတွေလူရင်ဆန္ဒတွေတလုံးတဝပြည့်စုံနိုင်ကြတဲ့ပုဂ္ဂိုလ်သူပုဂ္ဂိုလ်မြတ်ကြီးတွေဖြစ်ကြပါစေလို့ဆန္ဒပြုရင်းအပမဒေနမမိမလျောမဘောမတန်ထက်တန်သောအပမာဒတတိတရားဖြင့်တမ္ပါဒိဋ္ဌကိုစီကိုငါပြည့်စုံနိုင်ကြပါစေကုန်တည်းသာ